What up, players? It's Warboss Tay back up in this mug. Check out this showcase level Relictors Space Marine done up with the battle damage and the wear and tear. We are going to get into it right now. The paints you're going to need are from the first tutorial. You're going to need Mechanicus Standard Gray. You're also going to need Dawnstone, Wraithbone, Evil Sun Scarlet, Flash Gets Yellow. What else did I use? Pallid Witch Flesh. And Eshin Gray. I believe that was it. Nope, I was wrong. Oathwan Gray and Mornfang Brown. I had those on the side. So basically going into this guy, I was thinking, how could we bring him up from a tabletop standard, a battlefield standard, to something you would be proud to have in a showcase? And I thought with the Relictors, their color scheme is very plain, a lot of gray, right? Majority is gray with some black accents, and this flash of bone on the shoulder pad. So what I decided to do was play around the gray, and we use this brown, Mornfang Brown, to create dirt and mud, grime that got put into the recesses. And because the Relictors are fighting non-stop, 24/7, they don't have time for retrofit, I guess, or refit, rather. So their armor is going to get quite scratched and torn up, so I thought we'll do a lot of battle damage. And I had a lot of fun painting up this guy. I hope you enjoyed it. This video, again, is a continuation of my appreciation video to David Moffat, AxAnax Tabletop Gaming, for joining the July Painting Challenge this year. I hope you like this video, guys. If you do, please hit that like button and leave a comment down below. Probably 90% of you watching this video aren't collecting Relictors and you just want someone to hang with while you work on your own projects. So let's hang out and paint some minis. Alright, the first step we're going to take is we're going to use our base coat, which was Mechanicus Standard Gray, and we're going to add a little bit of Dawnstone. And you want to mix about 1 part Dawnstone to 2 parts of Mechanicus Standard Gray. And this is going to create a nice gray color that's a little bit lighter than our base color, while not being too bright. And that's what we want with these highlight steps in this showcase standard. We want to see a gradual progression of this color. So I'm using a piece of palette paper from Games Workshop, but I'm also a huge fan of using a wet palette, which is basically any container that has a paper towel on the bottom, a wet paper towel, and then you just use that as your palette. It works really, really fantastic, really great. And areas I'm going to be focusing on are, I'm lucky enough to have an overhead light, so now I'm able to see where the light really hits the model when I hold it at a certain angle. So I'm going to project that that's the angle the model is always facing on the table. That's where the light is always hitting it. So wherever I'm playing, you're going to see the same shadows, you're going to see the same highlights, and it's always going to be pretty consistent. Now for this first coat, basically just want to be as even as possible. The reason we use a wet palette, why it's especially important for this highlighting process, is that we want to just take our base coat and create a nice even progression of highlight. Hope you guys are all doing well out there. It is freezing where I am in California. I've got the heater off because I don't want it to distract too much, make too much background noise. But I am nice and bundled up, nice and cozy. I've got a nice hot cup of coffee with me, and we are just going to be working on this guy until he's done. No idea how long this video is going to take. Oh, I guess I do from the very beginning of this video. Let's look at the timestamp to see how long this is going to take. My thought process going into this showcase is that you're going to be painting up an army of these guys, right? So we want a system that is going to be easy to replicate and simple to like simple in concept. We want to be able to reproduce it over an entire army of figures while also giving you a very good result that you can be proud of on the tabletop. And I think, going through my notes, I've figured out a final result that's going to look really great, but also not take you an entire year to do an army of these guys. So when you're painting, here's one tip I can give you. When you're painting large armor pieces, flat armor pieces like this leg armor, the Space Marine, I find it's always really helpful to drag the paint down rather than across vertically, or across horizontally. I'm getting my verticals and my horizontals mixed up in my last two videos. So basically, if you're doing leg armor, up and down. If you're doing the foot armor here, then side to side. I can go back in and clean up these shoulder pads off camera. Back here. All right. While that's drying, we are going to go on to the shoulder pad, which I told you I would freehand. I was not able to find, I have a .001 micron pen that I use for all of my freehanding, and I can't find it with all of the things that I've unpacked yet. So while we wait for it, I'm going to show you a very simple way to do it. If you have a brush, you don't have a micron pen, first of all, I would always suggest getting a Micron Arts pen. It's going to make it so much easier to do this, but I'm going to be using a fine-tipped brush with a smaller bristle size. I'm going to be using my Wraithbone. So again, I'm thinning down the Wraithbone, and all we're going to be doing is painting a circle. This is going to work different for some people. Ask me, like, how do you freehand? And there's actually a tutorial I want to do for general freehanding concepts. This freehand design is going to be very specific to the Relictors insignia. Oh boy, this reminds me of when I did my project Night Lords a million years ago. I'm thinning down the paint. We'll see how this is going to go. Cross your fingers. I'm thinning it down so it's not going to be too lumpy. I can still see there's a little bit of this clumpiness to the paint. I don't think I thinned it down enough. We will fix that in post, as they say. Yeah, this is gonna be kind of tricky to do without that pen, but I'm gonna carry on with straight Othwan Gray, or I'm sorry, with straight Dawnstone. Othwan Gray is our next highlight color, so if you've got that, you want to put that on deck. So with this highlight color, we're going to be focusing on the edges and the uppermost areas, the hard edges where the light is really going to catch, because this is what the eye is going to initially pick out when someone just gives a very cursory look at your model. This is the highlight, what I like to call the pop color. Get that in frame, please. So I'm going to give him a little bit of an Angry Birds eyebrow. All right, with any of these steps, if you feel like you're going a little too far and you make a mistake, let's say, or there's something you did that you don't like, you just have to go back down the color step. So you've got your Dawn Stone and Mechanica Standard Gray mix. What I'm doing is I'm smoothing out that eyebrow right here. I'm making it not as big, and it's very simple to do. You just paint back over and what we call tighten up that highlight, tighten up the lines. Having a thin brush like this, a fine-tipped brush, is kind of mandatory in your. It's a mandatory tool to have in your arsenal, because it will really help you to achieve the best highlighting results. You can do it with the larger brush, but it's just going to take so much more time and really be more frustrating, because you won't be able to get these really thin lines that you want. So my idea with these Relictor Space Marines, and you can do this with most Space Marines if you are thinking about the fluff in the background of your army. My idea is that they, and thank you David Moffat, AxAnax Tabletop Painting, for telling me in my last video. He left a comment saying that there would not be any Primaris Marines for the Relictors because they were cast into the Eye of Terror before the Primaris were a thing. So they will only have these older marks of armor, unless your headcanon toys with that idea. And I think I would stick with that. Don't give these guys any Primaris Marines. Let them really just live on their own. And I think that's a good way to go. So, because they don't have any Primaris Marines, because they're access to equipment and to refurbishing and repairing equipment is very questionable. Who even knows? If they don't even know, people today, we're not sure if the Relictor Space Marines have remained loyal to the Emperor or if they've fallen to chaos, just because humanity's pretty much turned their back on these guys. We are going to assume that that they've taken some damage. There's been a lot of conflicts they've been in, so we're going to showcase that by doing battle damage next. The way you do battle damage is super easy, and all you're going to need is a shade darker than Mechanica Standard Gray, maybe 2 shades darker, and so I chose Eshin Gray. But there are a number of gray paints you can choose. You could even take Mechanicus Standard Gray and mix it with black. This is just the paint I found in my cupboard that will work for me. And basically all we're going to do is create diagonal or horizontal, vertical, however you want to do them. Create lines across the armor, as well as on the edges, on any hard edges that wouldn't normally see any wear and tear. That's going to be where you pick out these lines here. It's been a while since I did battle damage, and it's always one of my favorite things to do. Something you don't really want to do too much because it does have a tendency to go overboard, but I like it. Eshin Gray is a good it's a good color. I think it might actually be a little too light now that I'm seeing it. We'll keep going, but I might have to add some, yeah, I might have to add a little bit of black. Not sure if Eshin Gray is the darkest color. So in your last highlight, you're just kind of painting around it. My favorite places to add it, just because it's so visible, are at the bottom of the leg armor. And then, yeah, usually it's like one or two dings on the flat surface area there. And then I like the elbow pads are great too, because they're such sharp lines. I try not to mess up the helmet too much, but it's probably good to have a couple scratches in it, so I'll just add it like on the side, kind of like when you are painting a human face and you want to do a scar. Like, you don't want the scar to take up the whole face, but having a couple, yeah, having a little bit of it there it's okay. All right, so now you've got the ding, right? The area that's been cut out of the armor. So to emphasize it, to bring it up, we're going to take our Oathwan Gray, which is a very bright gray color. You could also use what's that other one? Administratum Gray. And you're going to be painting the bottom of the battle damage. What this does is it creates the illusion that whatever damaged the armor created a hard line that catches the light now. And the trick with this, and you're going to need your Eshin Gray nearby, is that you want to make this line as thin as possible. You don't want to highlight the entire armor piece or the entire scratch. You want to only paint the bottom outer edge. You can even use this time to tighten up the line of the scratch. And it's okay if your line is not absolutely thin, because we're gonna go back over and clean up this line with our Dawnstone and Mechanica Standard Gray mix. Just looking for all of those scratches and dings you made. Alright, so now we're going to go back to our original highlight mix of the Mechanica Standard Gray and the Dawnstone, and we're going to bring up that color right to the edge of the scratch. It looks a little too bright. What I'm going to do is do a pure line of Mechanica Standard Gray. This is going against my notes, but we'll see how this looks. There we go. So you can see how the highlight line, the bottom of the scratch, just disappears as you pull that darker armor color up. Oh, doesn't that look great? That is so much better. And if you feel like the scratch itself is a little too big, then work at it from the opposite end. So in this case, the top. And you can like shape your scratch using the Mechanica Standard Gray. You can make it smaller or more jagged. And that's kind of what I'm doing here. Yep, okay, scratch that. I'm gonna have to fix my notes. Use Mechanica Standard Gray straight out of, straight out of the pot, but just flat by itself without any highlight color. I guess it's because it creates a stronger contrast between the highlight of the scratch and the actual armor color, you know. Scratches are like my favorite, one of my favorite pieces of weathering to paint onto Space Marine armor, because they create such an awesome illusion. It also looks almost comic book, like a animation, cartoony. What am I trying to say? It makes it look almost like a cell shaded thing. Piece of art. The great thing about all these colors, if you make a mistake, you want to go back over it with the original color. That's very simple enough to do. If you don't like anything, it's there's never any reason to give up painting. Just go back over with the original color. All right, and let's clean up his helmet there. Yeah, his helmet scratch looks really too big. As a famous acting teacher of mine once said, when I was in a production of Pirates of Penzance in high school, too big. I'm actually kind of losing my first highlight, but that's okay. I'm gonna go back over, hit that highlight back up. Ah, it looks like I lost a scratch on his beaky. That's okay. That's okay. You know what? Maybe just one scratch on this guy's helmet is gonna work fine. We'll hit it with the highlight Dawnstone. I was kind of eyeing out that scratch on his beak this whole time, like, I don't know if that works. He's got a nice scar on his his helmet. That's fine enough. All right, and that is battle damage. If you want, you can even go, if you want to get really crazy, you can even go a step higher, add some pure white into your scar, the bottom highlight color. We're not going to do that. We're going to move on and go on to the weathering of the armor and the battlefield, I guess the debris that gets caught up in the armor folds. So this next step, you're going to need Mournfang Brown. And we're going to water down our Mournfang Brown, get a nice watered down, thinned down, however you want to do it. You want it to be a slight consistency, a little bit thicker than a wash. So you don't really want to see clumps of paint. And all we're going to do is paint into crevices. This is almost like a line highlight where you're going to take the paint and you're going to create a nice, it's almost like a shade. If you do, if you took a wash like Nuln Oil and then you just painted it between the lines. So next to scratches on armor, this is my favorite weathering technique. The reason why I chose it, like I said, for the Relictors is they are out there fighting in the warp. They're trying to gather all these chaos relics to fight chaos, and they are just at the end of the rope, you know what I mean? They're me at the end of 2020. So we're gonna give him a little bit of honest dirt and grime that gets caught in his armor here. He hasn't had time for a refit or repair. This is kind of the way I see mostly all Space Marines, because Space Marines are supposed to be warriors, fighting all the time. And the way I see them is that they are constantly in battle in all these war zones. They are not very pristine unless you see them right off the parade ground or right off their battle barge, marching out of the rhinos. They're all gonna have a little bit of battle damage. We're also gonna take some of that grime, and you're just going to be painting thin little streaks. It doesn't have to be every single one, but just pick and choose which ones look good to you. And then right in the helmet. Helmets are always going to be different. I chose a beaky helmet, or David Moffat chose a beaky helmet for his model here, but all of the Space Marine helmets have different areas where you can use this technique here. I happen to have a Space Marine helmet right here, so you've got this edge where you can add the Mournfang Brown to the area right above the ear, and along the back here. Just kind of identical for all Space Marine helmets, where you can kind of see where I added that. And as you work, as you do this technique, every so often, every once in a while, step back and take a look at the model and see if that creates the effect that you want. You don't want it to be overbearing. You don't want it to be too much. You can also choose a different color besides Mournfang Brown. I thought working off the gray, Mournfang Brown was a nice tone. All right, and there is that. Moving back onto the insignia, we're going to put a second coat of thinned down wraithbone. You can kind of see where it got a little clumpy there. So we're going to thin this down a little bit more, add just a little bit more of wraithbone. And sit back and let that dry as we kick up the eye lenses. Now the last highest color we used for the eye lens was this Evil Sun Scarlet. So we're going to just add a second coat of that. When painting eye lens, it's super important that you go thinner and thinner with each brighter color. You might be saying, well, Warboss Tay, we already painted Evil Sun Scarlet, and this is a reinforcing layer. That first time we painted Evil Sun Scarlet for the Tabletop standard marine, and get your Flash Gets Yellow out and mix it into the Evil Suns. Actually, no, don't mix it. My bad, my mistake. Just thin it down and then take a little bit of it on the end. We're gonna create little dots. You don't want to mix it. If you mix it, you get orange, or an orange higher up than the Evil Suns. And what we really want is just a dot, like the pupil. Woo! Oh, that looks so good. That does not look good at all. So one eye came out really nice. The other, not so much. So I'm just going to go back to my Evil Sun Scarlet. And I'm going to practice what I preach. And thin back down. My yellow paint one more time. Flash Gets is, I think, the brightest yellow that Games Workshop does. But I think their most vibrant color is Moot Green. There we go. Next we're going to take, what did I forget to do? On the bolter, I forgot to highlight that, so we're going to take our Dawnstone, straight Dawnstone, all by itself. And we're going to paint up the edges. So again, like the Space Marine armor, we don't want to work on the entire, every single hard edge of the bolter. But I'm thinking like corners, hard edges. We're defining the shape for the human eye to see where are the boundaries of this material. Perfect. All right, now let's work on this skull. I'm kind of putting off painting this skull. So I don't have Abaddon black. I've got this Vallejo color black. And the thing I mentioned in the last video was that you don't need a Games Workshop black a lot of these colors like Mornfang Brown and, Mechanica Standard Gray even, you can find in other ranges, but since this is a Games Workshop model, I'm trying to stick close to the Citadel paint range. But, black is black no matter which paint range you go to, so. Alright, before I screw this up, I am going to check out the artwork I found online, and we'll be right back. Alright, so we're back, and we're going to clean up this Relictors symbol. So I just thinned down my black paint on my wet palette, or my palette paper, and the first thing I'm going to do is tighten up this side of the circle. And what we want is we want a skull that is facing the left in profile. So I'm shaping the skull now. His teeth are going to be right at the front, so I'm going to put a little bit right there. Then there's some kind of like cheekbone or jawbone, so I'm going to tighten that right there. And the back of the skull comes up and around. We don't want it to look like a Tyranid, so I'm going to even out the top here. When you're doing any kind of freehand work, the most intimidating thing is to see the artwork online finished, because then it makes you afraid to even begin to attempt it, and that's the worst thing you could do. You want to find a good step-by-step program or process that you can replicate. And I feel like this is super simple because it's just one color, really, this bone color. And we're just painting these lines in to define the shape. So now I'm gonna do the eyes, and basically what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my black paint and I'm gonna create almost like a teardrop. Sorry, I noticed a bit of black paint on the end of my bristles there. And just like we've been practicing with the highlighting and everything else, if you make a mistake, you just go back over. But for now, we're going to do a teardrop. Okay, so he looks like a gray. And we're going to wait for that to dry, and then we're just going to go back in. And meanwhile, I'm going to get as thin of an amount on my bristles as I can, and I'm just going to create a couple of lines where his teeth should be. There we go. Woo! Looks like a Tyranid. We're going to wait for that to dry. I'm going to actually see it's such a huge glob that I put for that eyeball by accident, that eye socket. So I'm going to just drag some of that paint back out. And when that dries, we're going to go in with our wraith bone and we're going to flesh out the design a little bit. Let's see if there's anything else I really want to do. He looks good tromping through mud. I was thinking maybe I'll have him tromping through like some green grass, but I think he actually looks pretty good. And if we do put foliage on the base there, then it might look like, it might take away, the green might take away from the gray. So this color scheme is very similar to a pre-heresy loyalist word bearers, which uses stone gray, and it's also very similar to my Carcharodons, which use kind of this stone gray color. The trick with all of them is differentiating them. So what makes the Relictors special is that they have, in my opinion, they're going to have a lot of battle damage, they're going to have a lot of wear and tear, and they don't have the ornamentation that the Carcharodons are known for. They have a lot of that Maori tribal tattoo design, and the word bearers have a lot of runic designs and weird lines and swirls and shapes. These guys are very, the Relictors are very, they're very plain in their ornamentation. They don't have a lot. So we're not gonna add on a lot of fancy ornamentation on him. And in fact, it might even be in your headcanon that they scrubbed themselves of the symbols of the Imperium, because they're not completely loyalists anymore. They were deemed heretics by the Emperor, by the Inquisition, and cast into the Eye of Terror. So these Marines may have given up their symbols of the Imperium, or they might not. Maybe you have a 100% loyal ride or die group of Relictors that are all for the Emperor and the double-headed eagle, and they are repping the Imperium in the Eye of Terror to the last man. But for this guy, I think he's going to be right down the center, which is pretty much what I see the Relictors as, very neutral. So he's going to be without ornamentation, without the symbols of the Emperor, and but no Chaos symbols either, because you could also have a Chaos Space Marine kit-bashed force of Relictors that have almost become a war band, because they've lost the support of the Emperor, of the greater Imperial war machine. They can't get refitted, they can't get re-equipped and rearmed. So you could have your Relictors just as Space Marines. They fall into Chaos and they become a war band. That should be enough time of me, John, to get back to using our Wraithbone here to tighten up the lines. Oof. So I'm going to make the skull a little bit bigger at the back end here. Tricky thing is going to be getting the eye socket just right. So there's a little below, but mostly, most things with Warhammer 40k, everyone is scowling. Everyone's grumpy. So we're gonna make a grumpy face. I'm overcompensating a little bit, but I'm gonna go back with the black. Back with the black! And I'm going to flesh out that flesh out that skull. So you can see how I turned that large glob into a kind of grumpy looking scowl. Might not even need to be too much that I have to do. There we go. Just simple line across the top. And we're almost done with him. We're actually going to take Pallid Witch Flesh now, and we're going to highlight our freehand design. Pallid Witch Flesh is a next door neighbor to pure white. So it's got a little bit of a bone tinge to it, ivory. So what we want to do is, since Wraithbone is also very light, I'm gonna color the brow. I'm going to shape the back and the top edge there. Then we're gonna hit the cheekbone and the teeth. Of course, you could circumvent all of this by paying somebody, a scalper, like some ridiculous amount of money to get the Relictor's shoulder pads, but basically that's my interpretation of it. I'm going to take a line of black now, and I'm just going to create the separation of the front to the back by doing a straight line down the side there. clean that up. Oof. It's not my best freehand work, but without a Micron Arts pen, let's say it's not too bad. We're gonna let that dry, and then we're going to hit it with a Seraphim Sepia. Seraphim Sepia is used for any bone color. So because we're using Wraithbone and Pallid Witch Flesh to create this design, we're going to use just a little bit to take away from how terrible of a job I did. Okay, we let that dry for a little bit. Let's hit the final highlight that we need to do before we can call this one a wrap, and that's Runefang Steel. I just noticed my Runefang Steel is pretty gross. What is up with that? Why? Why would you do this to me? Games Workshop, after all of the good I've brought to your company over the years, why would you do this to me? Let me see if I've got another Runefang Steel around. I was probably dumb enough to buy a bunch. Yep, look at that. Let's see if this one is any better. Nope. You can also use Stormhost Silver. I'm pretty sure I bought one of those back in the day. Gosh, if this isn't a promo for Vallejo paints. All right, looks like I'm able to scrape some of the good stuff off the top of the lid of this Stormhost or Runefang Steel. Why does it do that? All my years of painting, I still don't know why metallic paint from Games Workshop separates like that. You have your that weird milky medium substance, metallic medium, I guess. And maybe I guess I didn't shake it enough when I pulled it out of storage, but that's why the eyedropper model like Vallejo uses, it works so well. Basically all I'm doing is I'm edge highlighting the silver. I'm gonna get the grumpy face right there, right in the center. The thing when you're highlighting a skull like this straight on, you want to hit cheekbones, you want to hit eyebrows, and right by the teeth. You don't want to paint the whole thing. Similarly with these vents, I'm only painting right across the center there, and then these vents on the bottom, just hitting the edges. All right, and the job's a good one. So this Relictors Space Marine was a lot of fun to paint, and it's good as a beginner army because you don't really have to worry too much. You can wrap your head around base coat, shade, highlight, and then as a more advanced painter, you can work on doing the battle damage, the scratches. You can work on your light theory, your color theory by painting up where the light reflects off the model. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. And then of course, yeah, freehand. You can go as deep or as simple as you want to. And a skull is a very basic shape that you don't have to worry too much about getting wrong. And if you do, then hey, it's the Relictors. They're so forgiving as a Space Marine chapter because they were basically kicked out by the Imperium. So if it's cool with me, it's cool with them, and yeah, it's cool with me, baby. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks again to David Moffat, aka AxAnax Tabletop Gaming, for taking part in the July Painting Challenge this year, and for all of you for sticking around this long. I hope you enjoyed this video, and we'll see you in the next one.